Obviously in Amsterdam a huge tourist attraction is the red light district. So I'll start off just by asking you how you feel about it ethically.
Personally, I think it's, well, as long as the women are not forced to do it, they should be able to do it if it's their own choice. Yeah.
Yes.
You agree with me in saying that if the person consents, this should be their right to do what they want with their body?
Yes.
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 I completely agree. But if someone is misled or forced into something, then that's wrong because it's their body, it should be their choice.
Well, of course, yeah.
Would you agree with me in saying that if the person isn't fully informed, if it's not completely their choice, then it's definitely immoral?
Yeah, it's definitely immoral.
This idea of people having their own choice, making their own informed consent, and not forcing anyone to do anything without their consent, does this belief for you extend beyond humans? Would you include animals in this belief, that we shouldn't use and harm an animal if they can't consent?
For pets, in example, we don't ask them to be our friend.
True.
And I have a cat, and I'm not sure it's consented to be my cat, but
true.
But I think he's happy. So.
So you're saying that if there's no capacity to consent,
Then you shouldn't be able to do it.
right? So would that not be the same with animals because they have got that capacity to give consent?
Exactly. They do not have that, so it shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a bit of a problem because we use animal bodies for consumption too much. It's not necessarily the fact that we eat animals, because animals eat each other. We've been eating animals for millennia.
Do you think that because something's always happened, does that necessarily make it moral to continue doing so?
No, not necessarily though.
And the idea about other animals eating other animals, do you think we should get our morals from what other animals do to each other? So if another animal rapes another animal or eats their own baby, could I use that to justify me doing that act?
No, I think we should view humans apart from animals. You know, animals are driven on instincts, and humans have their own consciousness. They have their own brain. You know, they can think logically about what they're doing. Animals cannot.
They don't have a moral compass.
They do not have a moral compass.
Sure.
They just do what's in their brain.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think, would you agree in saying that we have more moral agency, more control about understanding what's right and wrong?
Yeah.
When people can't give consent, we have to do what we think is in their best interest, right? Let's think beyond pets to where maybe it's more clear of an injustice. So let's say the animals we consume, they can't consent to that.
Yeah.
Is that an ethical issue to you?
Oh yeah, of course.
If I was to kill an animal here because I like the way they taste, would you say I'm doing something wrong?
Of course.
I am.
It's a really complicated question because from the moment you kill by yourself the animals and you would do it quickly.
If I had a dog in front of you and I did it quickly, I got a gun out behind the back of the head, shoot the dog.
I will cry for sure. But it's a human belief, you know. If I take a pen and I say his name is Steve and I crack in front of you, you will have like a little emotion, you know. It's at the moment we put like human emotions in some things.
Yes.
In something. It's too late.
Do you think that these animals, like a dog, can experience happiness and sadness in the same way we would?
And it's proved scientifically. So.
Yes.
I don't think we necessarily need to do it, but it's too easy to say that we should just instantly stop it because people get used to certain standards, and we can't just immediately throw it out the window because so much of our economy depends on it. Right now, we can all agree that there's just, although meat's real nice, I really like meat, but there is like the tax on the environment right now is too big.
You mentioned you enjoy the way it tastes, and I'm completely the same, right? I love the way these products taste. Do you think that an act can be morally justified based on someone getting pleasure?
No, not necessarily. You do not always need pleasure to necessarily survive.
We talked about the economy briefly. I guess if we think back to other injustices, like say in a human context, slavery, for example, it was a massive damage to the economy to abolish that. People lost their jobs. It's a whole industry that died. Do you think that trade could have been in any way justified based on the economy and people having jobs and making money from it? Do you think that there's any necessity to consume animals to sustain a healthy life?
No. It's fine. Again, scientifically, it's proven that no.
Right.
So there is not to think.
How is it we could morally justify killing an animal if we don't need to?
It's justified in our society, in our modern society. It's justified by traditions,
Yes.
by way of life.
Do you think that tradition should dictate morality?
No. powerful because I mean, there's a lot of ancient traditions that disappear because it was that disappear because we see that morality cannot work with them. Like you know, when people do sacrifice and kill humans, they did the same in India for long with 1,000 animals in front of the temples and something like that. I mean, that tradition, it's normal that it has to disappear, and it cannot be something that allows something to last. Maybe?
Sure. Right now we're doing it too much. We don't need this much meat, but you know, meat is a part of our life. It tastes good, and I think we do have the right to, you know.
For the sake of this conversation, let's just talk about it as in one animal then. How do I morally justify killing one animal, if I don't need to?
Let's say you've raised that animal for your whole life. You look that animal in the eyes and stab a knife through its neck. Would you be able to do it? Would you be able to justify that for a slab of meat?
I think I would. I think I could do it. Yeah.
How would you justify it?
You know, I want to live my life to the fullest. I want to enjoy every moment of it, and if I really feel like, okay, I should have a piece of meat right now, I really want it, then at that point it's my good right to kill that animal, even if maybe I do not need it. But if I own it.
So you think? Would you agree with that or disagree?
I think I disagree with that, to be honest. I mean, what's the point? With that reasoning, you could justify anything that you'd want to have, just because you want to live your life to the fullest. You can come and gather over here. You can justify any action just because you want to do it. For you, that's eating meat. For someone else, that's raping and stabbing someone to death just because they want to do it, because they want to live their life to the fullest. That's the same reasoning you're using.
What is the trait difference between, say, me and a pig? Language. Okay. So if I find a human that doesn't have the capacity to understand language, can I kill them?
Oh no, it's really no. I don't think it's.
It depends on cultures and on.
I really enjoy the meat, but I do think in the back of my head, you know, these animals should at least have a decent life, and if that happened, then I can morally justify eating that meat.
I'd say I've got two animals in front of you now. One of them's really sad, it's a factory farmed animal, terrible life. The other one is one I've looked after myself, really happy, all the space in the world. Is it more ethical for me to stab the happy one because they're happy?
If that was me, then I would probably eat the one that's sad first.
You'd put it out of its misery.
You at least put it out of its misery. Like there's always there's always that little difference. You know, I can see, okay, this animal's hurting, this animal's not. I should probably kill the one that's hurting first. Like, it doesn't deserve to suffer, but it's also, you know, I also have the right to eat it.
So in that sense, then, would you say that it's not justified based on giving them a happy life first? Because in your logic, that actually makes it worse.
Yeah. No, I don't really understand the question. What do you mean?
Sorry. So before you were saying that if we give them a happy life first, then it's okay. But now you're saying that you'd actually rather kill the unhappy one. I'm here to promote veganism, essentially, because veganism is a position of non-violence, and it means we are no longer paying for animals to suffer and die. And like you say, it's not a necessity. So the question is, if we don't need to put animals through this to survive or be healthy, what are we doing it to them for? Well, one of the things you were talking about giving it pleasure. Your friend made an interesting point about saying, well, that's the same logic a rapist would use, right? Because they're getting pleasure from it. But you were saying that's different. So what I want to ask you is, what is the difference in traits between, say, me and a pig that justifies that differential treatment?
Well, first of all, there's a big difference in eating something and raping something. Like, one you eat to survive, raping you don't need to survive.
So, but is it for survival? Or is it for pleasure?
I mean, yeah,
it's for pleasure.
It's also for pleasure, yeah.
But it's not for survival, is it?
Not always, no.
I know there's many differences between me and a pig, but what I want to know is the actual trait difference. Because if I was just to say it's because they're a pig, it's because they're not human, that's appealing to group, and that's no different to saying it's because he's a different race. So what I want to try and get from anyone is the actual trait.
You're basing it on trait intelligence, right? Or a certain level of self-consciousness.
Yes, basically.
Yeah.
That's what I grew
So
up with.
what makes it any different from, like, say we're really intelligent and someone else isn't? And that's the same distinction, right? What does the human-animal distinction mean? That's an arbitrary line. To be honest, I don't think we're seeing the effects that the bio-industry has on our society and our world and our climate. So most people aren't paying attention to it. They aren't aware of it. But I think the change will be gradual, and at one point we will reach that world, sooner or later.